clinicians and policymakers in all these organizations and across South Asia can come to a common platform where we can have meaningful dialogue, debate, and learning and sharing on Global Goal 6, water, sanitation, and hygiene. There is also another reason that from time to time, we also need to celebrate what we achieved. And if we look into the very recently published July 1st, the Joint Monitoring Program report jointly commissioned by UNICEF and WHO, where the global progress on water, sanitation, and hygiene is being mentioned, we have reasons to celebrate that in this particular South Asia region, in last number of years, the amount of people got liberated from open defecation and earned basic sanitation access is phenomenal, remarkable. Over 500 million people got liberated from that substandard human living standard. But side by side, I mean, the report also denotes that we have plenty of challenges ahead. Still, the basic sanitation access in number of countries are still few. And if we talk about safely managed water and sanitation, this region in particular is lagging behind. And if we go country by country, then we'll be seeing quite a wide variation of achievement and the status of water, sanitation, and hygiene, especially when we talk about safely managed sanitation and safe water. The recent COVID pandemic has particularly pointed on these weaknesses, and especially we thought of that the hygiene, especially the hand hygiene, the way it has been promoted is phenomenal in the last 2 years. And we had a separate series like this collective initiative you might have recalled that last October when we have been doing this series of dialogues on hand hygiene promotion, and probably this will be repeated. So this collective effort of different civil society organizations and multilateral bodies are creating a meaningful kind of learning opportunities for the region, and for a number of reasons, we believe that this may have impact even at the policy level to bring meaningful changes in the coming years. Now, with regard to particular session of today, which is strengthening municipal financing for sustainable sanitation service delivery in a small town, which is very relevant for South Asia. I will not go into the details because in a very few minutes, Maya and Ram would be, and Shubhagata and Neha would be delivering the context, as well as there would be presentation, which Maya and Ram would be doing, along with our distinguished speakers from number of these countries. And just to set the context that this is a study commissioned in India, Bangladesh, and Nepal. And we are very fortunate to be instrumental into this particular study, which will be presented in a few minutes. However, I would like to take this opportunity to invite you in the subsequent webinars, which is planned throughout the year and also in the coming year. And we'll be informing you, but just to name a few, that in November, we have a plan to have a webinar on strengthening water services between rural and urban areas with mutual cooperation. In December, we'll be doing a webinar on strengthening access to safe and affordable water services by women and girls for bringing transformative changes. And in January, role of monitoring and system of data and safely managed sanitation, SDG progress so far. And also in March, we will be having strengthening access to safe drinking water in the realm of climate change. So as you can see that the variety of the topics that we will be adopting so that the ranges of institution within the region can benefit out of it, but most importantly, the policymakers and the public sector implementation bodies can really get benefit out of this learning series. So with those few words, I would like to invite you in today's session, as well as the standing invitation to participate in the webinar series that will be following from November till February 2022. With those few words, Minu, over to you. And once again, I thank you for your joining and participating in today's session. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Harvey. Without much further ado, let's get into the first session, which is on setting the context, municipal governance and financing for sanitation in small towns. The presentation will be made by Mr. Shubhagata Dasgupta and Ms. Neha Agarwal from the Center for Policy Research in India. Shubhagata is a senior fellow at CPR and director of the Scaling City Institutions for India Sanitation Initiative. His current research focuses on drinking water and sanitation, urban, private, and public finance, housing and slum rehabilitation, and urban environmental infrastructure planning. He has also worked on issues of urban development with public, private, multilateral, and non-governmental organizations, including the World Bank, the International Finance Corporation, the Infrastructure Development Finance Company, and the Housing and Urban Development Corporation. Neha is a senior research associate with the Scaling City Institutions for India Water and Sanitation Program at CPR. Her research focuses on informing systemic improvements to the non-networked sanitation ecosystem in urban and rural India and spans topics like digital governance, scaling of technical innovations, and regional environmental sanitation planning. Over to you, Shubhagata and Neha.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much, Minu. Thank you so much, Carol Bai, for the introductions to this upcoming series. I'll just add one more institutional welcome to everybody. We are delighted to be in this partnership, and today's seminar is going to be very interesting. It's an area that we have found very useful to focus on. Small towns has been quite a focus for CPR's work in the recent past. In setting the context, I'll start by just showing you some maps of the world and showing you how important South Asia is for the global community. Much of the, it's a very large section of the population, surely, but it's also among the most densest areas in the world. And it is where much of the development is yet to happen. So in the nightlights picture, you do see that in spite of its high densities and high population, there's lots more that can happen in terms of a development parameter. Also, alongside this is that South Asia is the place where much of urbanization is to happen over the next 20 years. This change that is happening in South Asia has happened in the past in other regions, first in the West, but then in Latin America and East Asia too. South Africa and Asia together will have 3/4 of the world's population by 2050. Just these three countries, Bangladesh, India, Pakistan, are going to be among the most significant contributors to urban population going forward. Within this context, of course, the issue around small towns is that much of the mapping of towns and cities and metropolitan areas so far has focused on larger cities. Even in looking at the UN statistics, much of the focus has remained on larger cities. And while the populations are growing in larger cities, the smaller cities still constitute a significant proportion of the population, and in terms of numbers, they are wide. So if one was to reach out to all the urban population, there is no way but to reach out to all these geographies. Even in the future, 94% by 2035 will still be in numbers of urban areas will be in smaller towns. Alongside this, there's the large dense villages. As South Asia urbanizes, there are lots of villages that are turning into small towns. And this population will also be adding to the urbanized population. Neha?
Thank you, Shubhagatu. With an understanding of how South Asia's urbanization and the urban settlements are on the rise, let's unpack what we mean by urban settlements in the region. So typically we see a distinction between what is administrative urban and what the demographic and physical attributes of a settlement may allow for it to be called urban. And sometimes these categories do not always speak to each other. So when we talk about administratively urban, we see across Bangladesh, India, Nepal, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, a variety of types of urban local bodies that show up, from Paurashavas in Bangladesh to statutory towns with their whole gamut of subcategories in India, municipal corporation town committees in Pakistan, urban councils and municipalities in Sri Lanka. These are urban settlements that are legally recognized by the country system as so. The second criteria, like I said, may or may not show up as part of the administrative designation. It is the set of demographic and physical attributes. These can be population size of a particular settlement, the population density, whether or not it exhibits urban characteristics, let's say as understood as built up area or the level of access to different services. And going forward, it would be important for us to reconcile this disparity. And the reason that it's important to reconcile this disparity is because while the demographic and physical attributes of a settlement will continue to inform the type of infrastructural need that that settlement presents when it comes to water and sanitation, without the administrative mandate and the administrative empowerment that comes to that settlement, it will be hard to address those issues. So on the administrative angle, we have the legal and financial imperative set. When we go to the actual small towns of South Asia, again, the definition varies quite widely. So we have in Bangladesh, a non-population size-based metric, which instead looks at the minimum annual revenue. In India, we have two different definitions of what is smaller cities or smaller towns. And it varies across the board. To find that common ground itself becomes the first part of the question. If you could go to the next slide. However, we see that in the way that the different administrative types of urban local bodies exist, when we, let's say, talk about Nepal, which has municipal corporations and municipalities, or Bangladesh, which has city corporations and Paurashavas, there is that de facto distinguishing that happens across urban settlements by their size. Having gotten a sense of what we're talking about with respect to urban settlements and their administrative structures, let's go on to understand what is the current deficit when it comes to water sanitation towards Sustainable Development Goal 6. We see that in South Asia, there's been tremendous progress in furthering access to a toilet facility, but largely non-sewage sanitation dominates the urban wastewater management systems in South Asia at 60%. And if we look at how well the South Asian systems for wastewater management function, we recognize that 60% of households do not benefit from a clear wastewater management system. And when we unpack this data, if we go down to the city level, let's say in case of India, we're able to see this clear city size based divide in sewered and non-sewered sanitation, where smaller cities are more reliant on non-sewered sanitations and present accordingly a different set of needs compared to the bigger cities. Next slide. In India, how this has been tackled is starting with some early pilots in 2015, which were externally funded. The scale up has happened in the last 5 years across different states. But this scale up has largely been informed by particular states and has been state driven, right? And that becomes an issue because as we see with the map on the left-hand side, the density, the demographics of a place define its infrastructural requirements. And that is what should lead to interventions as opposed to simple top-down interventions by the state. Now, if we look at, again, how sanitation is governed and administered at the state level, there are different powers and abilities of different urban settlements based on the type of urban local body they have. Constitution in India specifies the differing urban local body types based on the settlement size, and it leaves the matter of the exact criteria to the states, but not all states have a criteria, and the criteria in any case is not uniform. So we see a wide variation in the sizes of these three different types of urban local bodies. Over to you, Shubhagato.
Yeah, thanks. So just to conclude then, means in the wide gamut of urbanization, there are multiple entities that have administrative responsibility. And as you go smaller in size, there are a wide variety of administrative formations. And these formations have lesser authority in planning and finance or even administration, whereby making them much weaker. And parastatals or higher level government plays an important role in these areas. If you look at the longer term evolution of financing for these small towns on the capital investment side, as South Asia has been quite dominated by programs at both the national and provincial level, financing some of these infrastructures. While in urban and in metropolitan cities, there has been programs funding sanitation and water supply for a number of years now, a generation in urban, 2 generations in rural. There's much more interest now in financing programs in smaller cities. And this has been seen across both the multilaterals as well as government programs. However, what constrains these small cities is that much of the financing that's available to it comes from tied resources, and these are not at the flexibility of the local body. If you look at how these are compared with the larger cities, there are lower incomes and affordability and the productivity of the population in smaller cities. That leads to a lower tax base and a user charge base, which constrain the autonomy as compared to larger cities because the own revenues are lower. Much of the programs are tied, so you more or less have to perform to standards set by different tiers of government. And then that automatically leaves less money for operation and maintenance, which leads to a lot of lower levels of service. Finally, however, it's an imperative to look at this large number of smaller towns that are emerging in South Asia, both from the economic and the demographic perspective. On the economic perspective, when calculations on GDP loss were made, smaller towns had a significant and proportionately higher contribution than in larger cities. So there needs to be an increased policy attention to these smaller cities and increased governance flexibility there. With this, I'll leave it here. Thank you very much, Meenu.
Thank you, Shubhagato and Neha. Okay. In our next session, we'll be sharing the study findings and discuss with municipality representatives from the countries. The session will be moderated by Mr. Ram Krishna Paul, Senior Consultant, Athena Infonomics. Ram has over 7 years of experience working on non-sewage sanitation, designing sanitation plans, and implementing FSTPs in India, Bangladesh, and Nepal. Ram has also researched and published on the topic of water governance in small towns of Uganda. To start the session, I would like to invite Ms. Maya Gaynor, Senior Consultant, Athena Infonomics, to please come in. At Athena Infonomics, Ms. Maya focuses on wash sector governance and institutions. She has a master's degree in economics and international development from Johns Hopkins University and previously worked as a researcher on governance and public policy at Princeton University.
Hi, Manu, and thank you very much, and thank you to you all for being here. So I was part of the team that developed the sanitation financing in municipal government study, and I will just very briefly walk through the study findings before turning it over to Ram and representatives of several of the municipalities to discuss their experiences and the real heart of the study, which is good practices from these small towns. So just briefly on the study objectives and methodology, as the previous speakers have mentioned, there's been a lot of progress in South Asia in extending especially basic sanitation services, but there's also a long way to go in order to achieve safe management of fecal sludge. And there are a lot of challenges, as the previous presentation touched on. There are a lot of constraints around financing for capital investment, especially with the limited flexibility. Small towns have more limited revenue base to sustain their operational expenditures. And often the institutions also require some further development, especially in terms of human resources and developing planning and management capacities. And so this study really wanted to look at what we can learn from good practices in financing sanitation services in small towns in Bangladesh, India, and Nepal. And in order to do that, just briefly, the methodology we followed was to start with a literature review and interviews with experts and government officials, development partners at the national level to really contextualize the challenges that small towns needed to address and that we should look at ways of solving, and create a long list of about 15 possible case studies for more in-depth research. We then looked at the long list of case studies using the citywide inclusive sanitation framework. So we analyzed how each of these towns was performing on the CUICE outcomes of equity, sustainability, and safety, and the CUICE functions of mandate, accountability, and resource planning and management. And based on that, we identified 6 towns for in-depth study. We then went to those towns and conducted qualitative interviews with the municipal governments, private operators involved in delivering sanitation services, development partners, and other sector stakeholders. So the towns that we focused on were Mahalakshmi and Birtamod in Nepal, Sakipur and Janaida in Bangladesh, and Denkanal and Sirsila in India. And you'll hear from representatives of several of those towns in just a couple of minutes. So based on the experiences of those towns, we developed a few recommendations looking at different levels of government. So starting at the municipal level, one thing that really came out very strongly in all of these towns was that it's really important to develop multiple revenue streams to help sustain the costs of sanitation operations. All of the towns had user fees, and these are common elsewhere as well, but they're often not sufficient to fully sustain the services, let alone to finance future interventions. And so towns that were performing well in terms of operational sustainability had identified other revenue streams. For instance, in Denkanal, developing a market for compost, in Janaida for introducing new registration fees and taxes to fully cover the cost of delivering sanitation services. A second good practice that we identified was clustering services with neighboring localities. This, in the case of Birtamod, allowed the municipality to share the costs of both the capital and operational costs of both a solid waste treatment facility and an FSTP with 2 other nearby municipalities. Although we did note that in order for this to work well, there need to be strong governance mechanisms to clearly allocate responsibilities and share costs. Another example of clustering comes from Denkanal, where the municipality's FSTP serves an additional 17 gram panchayats, which helps the municipality increase revenue. And so there are multiple ways that towns can take advantage of clustering, but this is something that it looks like is important to explore when thinking about structuring service delivery. And then finally, for municipalities, even as they invest in strengthening institutional capacity and making investments in hardware, it's also important not to neglect the critical issue of public engagement. One thing we saw across municipalities was that in order to introduce new costs that users have to bear, for instance, a sanitation tax in Janaida, or to develop sufficient demand for services to generate revenue, it's very important to have a strong awareness and outreach program to generate demand and ensure people are willing to pay. And then at the regional and central levels, we learned from the municipalities about some practices that have helped them or would help them to most effectively deliver sanitation services that could be implemented by other levels of government and by development partners. So first, and this one is quite straightforward, but critical, is dedicating sufficient resources to support sanitation services at the municipal level. Even the towns that were performing well in terms of sustaining operational expenditures would still need support for capital investments and for institutional strengthening. And this should remain a priority for central and regional governments. But this doesn't necessarily mean that sanitation has to be funded at the expense of other priority sectors. One interesting thing that we saw in several towns was that there are opportunities to integrate sanitation activities with activities in other sectors, such as livelihoods or agriculture, and leverage resources to have impact across sectors. For example, in Sakipur, the Department of Agriculture helped create a market for the compost produced by the town's co-treatment plant. And so this benefited both the municipality in terms of generating additional revenues and the farmers in terms of having a stable access to a source of high quality compost. A second major recommendation, and the colleagues from CPR touched on this, is increasing the predictability, transparency, and flexibility of intergovernmental transfers. Transfers are a really critical source of funding for municipalities, but they also present a number of challenges. So the study that the colleagues from CPR referenced that a large portion of transfers across all three countries are tied, meaning they can only be used for specific things. And what exactly they can be used for can also change as priorities shift at the central or regional levels. And so that can present a challenge for municipalities that want to use funds for sanitation, but perhaps the priorities have changed. And so making those transfers flexible enough to accommodate planning needs at the local level is one important area for focusing on with regard to transfers. Another is making sure that it's very clear how much funding towns will receive and when, so that they can develop and implement medium and long-term plans without uncertainty about when they'll have access to resources or how much. And then we also heard in some cases that small towns may not necessarily be aware of the processes they need to follow in order to access certain transfers, especially if there are more complex qualification criteria. And so this is an area where capacity building could be very valuable. And that brings us to a third recommendation for both central and regional governments and for development partners, which is to really develop institutional mechanisms to deliver technical assistance on financing at scale. The towns that we were looking at are positive outliers in a sense, where they've received support often from different institutions to pilot new approaches and learn and demonstrate how different technologies and business models can be applied. But that kind of support is not always feasible at scale. And so in order to help other towns learn from what these municipalities have been doing, a critical area for collaboration between governments and development partners is to develop platforms to provide guidance to municipalities on how they can access and manage funds for sanitation. And I should mention that in addition to hearing from municipalities in this session, the next session will touch on the experiences of governments and development partners, and will be interesting to hear how they see these kinds of issues. So this is just a small highlight of the information in the report, which is available online, and you can find more detail on the municipalities' experiences and on the recommendations in the full report. But I think the best way to really learn about what's taking place at the local level is to hear from the municipalities themselves And so I will hand it over to my colleague, Ram Krishna Paul, who will introduce our speakers from several of the municipalities that participated in the study. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Maya. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this session. Thanks, Maya, for summarizing the learnings from the study. And now, as Maya mentioned already, that we will hear a bit in details about some of the key learnings which Maya shared as overall recommendations from the study. And I think it will also help answer some of the clarifications that have already been raised in the Q&A sections. So we will take them as well. But before, just to begin, so to introduce the speakers, we have today with us Mr. Mohammad Mustaq Ahmed, who is the Secretary from Jinaida Poroshaba from Bangladesh. Mustaq Bhai has been really instrumental in implementing the sanitation tax and other sanitation-related interventions in Jinaida, Bangladesh. We also have with us Mr. Dhruba Kumar Shivakoti, the Mayor of Birtamod Municipality from Nepal. And we have along with us Mrs. Rashmita Mishra, the Municipal Engineer from Dhenkanal Municipality. Now, we were also supposed to have Mr. Raghu Soma, the Environmental Engineer from Sirsila Municipality, but however, due to there's been heavy rainfalls in Sirsila Municipality and there's a power outage. So Bitush Luthra, who is a lead consultant with Athena Infonomics, will be speaking on behalf of the Sirsila Municipality. So just to start with, my first question would be for Rasmita ji, and I think she is also here on the panel. And Rasmita ji, we have often talked about this, and you have mentioned that smaller towns, particularly for smaller towns, it is difficult to arrange capital investments and from their own source revenue. We know that, and for Dhenkanal municipality, we know that the municipality received financial and technical support both from the state government as well as from non-governmental organizations and donor organizations. But can you please help us understand or share your experience on how the town is able to sustain on its operational expenses from your learnings and from the kind of interventions that you are implementing in Dhenkanal? Rasmita ji, over to you. Yeah.
Thank you, Rampalji, and good afternoon to all. Initially, we received government funding for the establishment of our waste treatment plant, but now entire operational and maintenance cost is totally coming from the waste management rules that we have adopted for entire for sanitation value chain. First, on the basis of my waste is my responsibility, and then waste is now treated as regular genetic waste. Our municipality has 5 numbers of waste treatment plants designated as waste centers, as revenue are generating from these centers. So these waste plants are now designated as waste centers, and all the entire value chains of the sanitations are now in the hand of our women, SHG self-help groups, and financial. There are 3 numbers of source of revenue. That is, one is selling of biocompost, and second is user fee collection, and third is selling of recyclable waste. The 3 main revenue resources coming from the oil centers, and there is, as we know, all the adequate quantities of waste are available on daily basis. So there is no issue of raw materials for running these plants not only this waste are coming free of cost, rather we are imposing collecting service charges from the residential and commercial units, which is 1 to 1.5 rupees per day from each and every household. And there is also no marketing issues, as our government of Honorable CM have passed the order for selling of more customer biocompost, and HRDUD department has already notified that all line department will procure the more from the municipal area or the ULB. And, at the rate of rupees 20, which is not a less amount as we are generating during daily basis 180 kg and 180 kg per day, and it is more or less 54 tons per month, and it is coming from oil centers, from treatment of wet waste and dry waste is around 1.5 lakh. All oil centers are tagged with some watts and market area, and the user fee and from the households and commercial waste are being booked with that oil center, booked with the account of that oil center. Around 10 to 15 lakhs. Yeah, we have 5 oil centers in our internal municipality, and all 5 clusters, all watts are tagged with this oil center, and the revenue from each oil center revenue is outcoming around 10 to 12 lakhs, and our expenditure towards incentive of the workers and operational maintenance of the machines are going only 6 lakhs. And our department also has taken innovative steps for self-sustainable of this oil center to minimize the maintenance cost of all the machines in our oil centers. They have already signed a MOU with all government ITIs, industrial training centers, and the students and the staff of the industrial training centers will give the maintenance service of all the oil center, all the equipment established in the oil center. This is about our solid waste management. Similarly, in our SSSL service,
Rasmita ji, if I may just request, would it be possible for you to use an earphone? It's very there have been a lot of things on the chat box saying that it's not clearly visible, audible. So it will be helpful if you can maybe use a earphone if you have something nearby.
Is that audible?
Or maybe if you can speak a bit closer to the laptop. Yeah, can you try now, please?
Hello.
Yes, we can hear you now. Yeah.
Can I start from beginning or from the...
No, the last point where you just stopped in terms of the revenue generation. Yeah.
From the oil waste, we are generating biocompost and selling this biocompost to different line department as already said that all line department like forest department, agriculture department, horticulture department, all these departments now starting procuring from the internal municipality. In this year, we have already sold around 47 lakhs. We are 47 lakhs of more biocompost to other line departments. It's around 263 tons. And from the dry waste, we are further recycling, further segregating the dry waste and the waste which can be recyclable. We are sending it to recycler, and the rate already been notified by our council that is vary from rupees 5 to 10 per kg, In this way, we are getting a monthly 30 to 50,000 from the waste. I'm telling about one cluster, one oil center, around one oil center. In one oil center, 6 watts are tagged with this one oil center. And also we are from the PET bottles, we are processing the PET bottles and supplying it to the NH project. It is being used by the NH, being used in NH project around 14 per kg. And we are also done some plastic beads from the PET bottles and single-use plastic and using, and now you are using it in our road construction. This is all about our solid waste management. Similarly, in FSSN, our municipality have one FSCD plant, People Plus Treatment Plant. And because this is a municipality, Dhenkanal municipality is one of the municipality which is giving FSSN service to rural areas. Within 20 kilometers of the country, you will be we are giving our FSSN service to 92 villages, in for which optimum usage of plant with same HR cost. Our plant is running full capacity, and so that additional revenue comes to the FSCV plant. Besides the service packages, we are also treating treated water, and this treated water being reused by for their construction in different developed work for curing.
All right. I think given the time limit and not to cover, I think thank you, Rasmita ji. You have covered a lot and sharing for some of the revenues that you have mentioned for the like be it from the FSTP or from the solid waste management user charges and from the user charges of the collecting and disposing from the desludging vehicles collecting fecal sludge from the nearby gram panchayats as well. Also, for the sake of time and just to move to the next part, like I would like to also call upon Mr. Dhrubaji from Nepal, from Birtamot, Nepal, just to try to understand, like for example, in the case of Dhenkanal, the town accepts fecal sludge from the 70 nearby gram panchayats. In the case of Birtamot, it's a bit different in the way it is clustering, and it is right now participating in a cluster of 3 municipalities to share the treatment plant infrastructure. And I would like to understand, maybe Dhrubaji, if you can maybe share some lights on the benefits and the challenges of clustering that you have faced, and maybe why did your town, Birtamod, opt for the clustering approach, and if you can share the kinds of challenges that can arise from because of the use of or because of clustering that your town is practicing right now. Dhrubaji? Yeah.
हजुर धन्यवाद नमस्कार म त नेपालीमा बात गर्छु
It will be helpful if you can kindly speak in English because we do not have an interpretation right now for Nepali.
But excuse me, sir. The letter has said that it is available in English or Nepali.
It will be helpful. Dhrubaji, you can please go ahead in English. In Nepali, we will try to translate it as much possible. Yeah.
Ram, the translation button has appeared now.
Yes, it
So
is
it won't be a
available,
problem.
but there is no Nepali language to select.
No, I mean, I think by default it shows Bengali. So
Dhrubaji, will it be possible for you to speak in English, please?
नहीं possible नहीं होगा
Hindi?
हिंदी
We will
होगा
try to, yes, we will try to translate it. I will be translating it. Yeah.
हाँ हिंदी होगा तो सॉरी सर वो खास करके हम लोग का यहाँ पर 2 नगरपालिका मेची नगरपालिका और बिरतामोड नगरपालिका और बुद्ध शांति गांव पालिका 3 पालिका मिल करके हम लोग का मेची नगरपालिका में ये स्लॉट का जो कारखाना है वहां पर लगाया हुआ है ये बिल ग्रेस फाउंडेशन का ये जो एडीबी मार्फत आया था 85% उनका है और 15% हम लोग का पालिका का कंट्रीब्यूशन से बनाया गया है। तो तीनटा पालिका में जो जिसका जो पब्लिक है जिसका जितना बेसी पॉपुलेशन है वो पॉपुलेशन का आधार में हम लोग किया इस तरीके से बिरतामोड़ नगर पालिका ने 78 लाख लगाया और बुद्ध समिति ने 38 लाख लगाया और मेची नगर ने 20 लाख लगाया। इस ढंग से हम लोग का कंप्लीट हो गया और तो प्लान कंप्लीट हो गया है। अब 2 वर्ष बाद में उसमें बहुत बेसी आपका कंपोस्ट मल निकलने वाला है और हमारा जो नगर पालिका है यहाँ पर ओडीएफ हो गया था। हम लोग का टोटल 99% हम लोग का शौचालय बन गया। तो ये जो इसका समस्या था वो टैंकर वाला उठा के ले जाके कहीं झाड़ी में कहीं जंगल में कहीं नदी में बगा देता था। इसको अभी हम लोग पूर्ण रूप से इसको बंद कर दिया। तो हम लोग का जितना भी यहाँ पर सॉलिड जो आता है टॉयलेट का टैंकी से जो ले दो आता है इसको ले जा करके हम लोग वो प्लांट में रख रहे हैं। तो अभी हम लोग का उसका रिक्वायरमेंट से नहीं जो भर्ती करने के लिए नहीं पहुंच रहा था हम लोग दूसरा भद्रपुर से भी उसका ले करके हम लोग लगा रहे हैं। वहां पर मिनिमम हम लोग वो उसको टैंकर को चार्ज किया। तो हमारा नगर पालिका में टैंकर नहीं है, हम लोग खरीद कर नहीं सक रहे हैं, इसलिए जो प्राइवेट टैंकर से हम लोग उठा करके ले जा करके वहां पर करते हैं। और प्राइवेट टैंकर वाला थोड़ा पब्लिक से थोड़ा ज्यादा पैसा ले रही है। हम लोग का अपना म्यूनिसिपैलिटी का नगर पालिका का टैंकर नहीं है। तो हम लोग ने एक टैंकर बिरतामोड़ नगर पालिका को दीजिए, इसलिए कुछ पब्लिक का सुविधा होगा और हम लोग का जो टैंकर से बिक्री बोकेगा ये अनुसार उन लोग को भी बोकेगा बोल करके हमने मांगा था। लेकिन ये जो बिल गेट्स फाउंडेशन से जो ये पैसा आकर के जो बना है इसके लिए हम लोग बिरतामोड़ वासी ये 3 जो नगर पालिका है हम लोग यहाँ का पब्लिक एकदम खुश हैं। एकदम सक्सेसफुल तरीका से वो बन गया है और वहाँ पर कोई बदबू भी नहीं आता है। पहला बहुत विरोध किया, बदबू आएगा, ये आएगा, वो आएगा बोल करके बहुत तंग किया था। लेकिन अभी जो प्लान बनने का बाद में जो स्टार्ट किया तो वह सभी वहाँ का नजीक का जो पड़ोसी सब है वो उन्होंने नहीं ये ठीक किया हम लोग बोल करके किया। और उसका जो अभी हम लोग उसका जो वाटर जो आ रहा है ये वाटर को भी हम लोग ऑर्गेनिक सब्जी के लिए वो पानी को भी सप्लाई करके सब्जी में देने का भी अटूट कर रहे हैं। और अच्छा तरीका से हम लोग का वो बना हुआ है। और हमारा नगर पालिका ये स्लॉट बनने से ये कारखाना बनने से हम लोग का पूर्ण रूप से ओडीएफ हो गया। इसके लिए हम लोग बिल गेट्स फाउंडेशन और एडीबी को पूरे नगर का तरफ से हम लोग धन्यवाद देना चाहते हैं।
ध्रुव जी एंड अगर आप ये बता पाएंगे कि कुछ चैलेंजेस आप लोग फेस किए, जैसे आपने बोला कि 85% आया था फ्रॉम द कैपिटल फंडिंग हिसाब से एंड 15% आप लोगों को खुद से मैनेज करना हुआ था। तो तीनों म्युनिसिपैलिटीज को मिलकर, तो इस पे आप लोगों ने कुछ मतलब कुछ चैलेंजेस आप लोग आपने फेस किया था तभी डिस्कशंस के वक्त, ऐसा कुछ आपने फेस किया था क्या?
नहीं, अब पैसा तो हम लोग म्युनिसिपैलिटी से दिया, उसके लिए तो हम लोग दिया और हम लोग का फिर आगे भी कुछ देना पड़ेगा, वो हम लोग मैनेज कर रहे हैं। लेकिन पहला को जो फेस हुआ था तो वहाँ का और जो पब्लिक है वो पब्लिक का थोड़ा वहाँ पर कंप्लेन था, वो लोग रखने नहीं दे रहा था। लेकिन उन लोग को हम लोग सब मिल करके उन लोग को मनाया। जब कोई समस्या आया तो उसी रोज इसको बंद कर देंगे, इसलिए आप लोग अभी ऐसा नहीं कीजिए। यहाँ पर जो काम जो यहाँ पर जो कोई भी एम्प्लॉयर चाहिए तो आप ही लोग का यहाँ का ओरीपरी का एम्प्लॉयर को यहाँ का नजीक का लोग को एम्प्लॉयर का दिया जाएगा। और यहाँ का सर्टेन एरिया का टोटल स्लॉट है विदाउट मनी, हम लोग ले जाके उसको व्यवस्थापन करेंगे, उसको आपको एक पैसा देना नहीं पड़ेगा बोल करके उन लोगों को मनाया। तो अभी जब कंप्लीट होकर के हम लोग का जब शुरू हो गया काम सॉलिड डालने का शुरू हो गया, तब सब लोग अभी पब्लिक भी खुश है कि यहाँ पर से कोई ऐसा समस्या नहीं होता है। ठीक किया हम लोग बोल करके किया। तो उसमें जो सिक्योरिटी है वहीं का आदमी है, कोई चाहिँ वहाँका कर्मचारी वहीँका नजिकका आदमी को दिया और वो लोग का किसी का भी टॉयलेट का टैंकी भर्ती हो जाता है तो वो हम लोग उसको विदाउट मनी विदाउट कॉस्ट वहाँ पर हम लोग ले जाकर के विसर्जन करते हैं। तो थोड़ा कोई भी काम करने से पहला तो थोड़ा समस्या होता है, लेकिन वो समस्या को हम लोग समस्या न देख करके उसको हम लोग सेटल किया था।
Thank you, Dhrubaji. Thank you so much. And just for all the speakers, just to translate and summarize what Dhrubaji just mentioned in English as well. For Birtamod is a part of group of municipalities, including Mechinagar and Buddha Shanti, which are located very close to Birtamod. So these three municipalities together have jointly invested into a fecal sludge treatment plant, which is located in the town, like a smaller town, within the part of these three municipalities. In terms of financing, the 85% of the funding, capital funding, came from the central government, as well as from the development banks and financial institutions. And the remaining 15% was something that the municipalities had to arrange amongst themselves. And as Dhrubaji mentioned, in terms of the challenges, and which is also something which Maya mentioned during her recommendations that she was sharing, that acceptance among the people, among the residents nearby to have a treatment plant is very important to create, to build. And I think that is one of the challenges which Dhrubaji highlighted as well, that it will be helpful to share the learnings and share what are the positive learnings that or the positive outcomes of having a treatment plant in a city can do and it is important to convey these learnings and to build make the households and the residents aware about these benefits of a treatment plant, and also to engage them in the treatment plant. Like in the case of Birtamod, we have seen that the operators and the caretakers are appointed from the nearby areas. I think that is one of the challenges that Dhrubaji mentioned. And just to go on to the next one, and I will now request Mustaq Bhai to come in, and we'll be speaking in Bengali, and I would request all of the participants to kindly click on the interpretation button over there, and you can shift to the Bengali language channel to listen to the interpreted language voiceover. Mustaq Bhai, namaskar. Just to hello, Mustaq Bhai, can you hear me? আপনি শুনতে পাচ্ছেন?
হ্যাঁ, শুনতে পাই। আপনি শুনতে পাচ্ছেন?
হ্যাঁ, তো আমরা ঢেঙ্কানালে দেখলাম যে তারা অনেক জায়গা থেকে রেভিনিউ জেনারেট করতে পারছে, কম্পোস্ট বিক্রি করছে, ইউজার ফিস থেকে জেনারেট হচ্ছে রেভিনিউ। তবে জেনাইদাতে অনেক বিভিন্ন ধরনের রেভিনিউ মেকানিজম আছে, মানে ইউজার ফি আছে, রেজিস্ট্রেশন ফিস আছে, এবং তার সাথে সাথে স্যানিটেশন ট্যাক্সও আছে। তো মুস্তাক ভাই, আপনাদের একটা প্রশ্ন আমাদের যেটা মাথায় আসছে এখন, যে আপনি কাইন্ডলি যদি আমাদের সাথে শেয়ার করতে পারেন যে ঝিনাইদহতে এই রেভিনিউ যে যতগুলো মেকানিজমস আছে কিভাবে স্ট্রাকচার করা হয়েছে, সেটা একটু অন্যদের জন্য খুব হেল্পফুল হতো।
সকলকে আমি ঝিনাইদহ পৌরসভার পক্ষ থেকে স্বাগত জানাচ্ছি। আমরা ঝিনাইদহ পৌরসভা বাংলাদেশের মধ্যে একটি মডেল পৌরসভা। ঝিনাইদহ পৌরসভা বিভিন্ন উপায়ে সরকারের নির্ধারিত গাইডলাইন অনুযায়ী, সরকারের আইন অনুযায়ী, 2009 সালের আইন অনুযায়ী নানাবিধ রাজস্ব সংগ্রহ করে থাকে। তার মধ্যে স্যানিটেশন ট্যাক্স উল্লেখযোগ্য। আমরা স্যানিটেশন ট্যাক্স 2009 সালের আইন অনুযায়ী এবং পৌরসভা ট্যাক্স শিডিউল 2014 সালের আইন অনুযায়ী এবং পৌরসভা ট্যাক্স আদায় পদ্ধতি 2013 সালের আইন অনুযায়ী আমরা এই ট্যাক্স আদায় করার ব্যবস্থা গ্রহণ করেছি। আমরা প্রাথমিক পর্যায়ে আমাদের টাউন লেভেল কোঅর্ডিনেশন কমিটি আছে, ওয়ার্ড লেভেল কমিটি আছে। আমরা ওয়ার্ড পর্যায়ে জনসাধারণের সাথে আলাপ করি এবং জনসাধারণের মতামত নিয়ে ওয়ার্ড পর্যায়ের মতামতটি আমরা ডিস্ট্রিক্ট যে আমাদের টাউন লেভেল কমিটি আছে, টাউন লেভেল কমিটিতে উপস্থাপন করি। টাউন লেভেল কমিটির মতামত সাপেক্ষে আমরা পৌর পরিষদের সবাই উপস্থাপন করি। পৌর পরিষদের অনুমোদন সাপেক্ষে আমরা স্যানিটেশন ট্যাক্স ধার্য করেছি এবং এই স্যানিটেশন ট্যাক্স ধার্য করার পরে আমাদের জনগণ, আমাদের পৌরবাসী এটাকে স্বাভাবিকভাবে নিয়েছে। এতে আমরা তেমন কোনো প্রতিবন্ধকতার সৃষ্টি আমাদের হয়নি। আমরা প্রাথমিক পর্যায়ে গভর্নমেন্ট প্রতিষ্ঠানের উপর আমরা 12% FSM ট্যাক্স ধার্য করি। পরবর্তী বছরে আমরা গভর্নমেন্ট প্রতিষ্ঠান 12% এবং জেনারেল পাবলিক আছে যারা, তাদের হোল্ডিং এর উপর 5% FSM ট্যাক্স ধার্য করি। আমরা অল ওভার সমস্ত পাবলিকের উপরে 5% এবং গভর্নমেন্ট প্রতিষ্ঠানের উপরে আমরা 12% FSM ট্যাক্স ধার্য করেছি এবং এটা নিয়মিত আদায় হচ্ছে। এবং এই ব্যাপারে আমাদের শহরের মানুষ এই ট্যাক্স দিতে কোনো প্রকার আপত্তি উপস্থাপন করে নাই। আমরা এই স্যানিটেশন ট্যাক্স আদায় করে আমরা আলাদা একটি অ্যাকাউন্টের মাধ্যমে এটাকে, এই অর্থ আমরা সংগ্রহে রেখেছি যে যদি ভবিষ্যতে আমরা, এখন হয়তো আমাদের কোনো ডোনার কান্ট্রি বা কোনো ডোনার আমাদেরকে সহযোগিতা করছে, কোনো সময় হয়তো এই সহযোগিতা থাকবে না, আমরা নিজের পায়ে দাঁড়ানোর জন্য, পৌরসভা নিজের সক্ষমতা অর্জন করার জন্য এবং FSM কার্যক্রমকে সাস্টেনেবল করার জন্য আমরা এই ট্যাক্সটা একটি অ্যাকাউন্টে, এই ট্যাক্সের আদায়কৃত অর্থটা একটি অ্যাকাউন্টে সংরক্ষণ করে ব্যাংক হিসাবে সংরক্ষণ করি এবং সেখান থেকে আমরা ভবিষ্যতে আমাদের ভেকুট্যাক করাই, স্যানিটেশন কার্যক্রম বাস্তবায়নে বিভিন্ন কার্যক্রম আছে সেগুলো বাস্তবায়ন এবং আমাদের ট্রিটমেন্ট প্ল্যান্ট FSTP যেটা আছে, এটাকে যদি আমার টোটাল শহরের মানুষকে এই FSM নেটওয়ার্কের আওতায় আনতে হয়, টোটাল শহরের মানুষকে যদি এই সেবা নিশ্চিত করতে হয়, তাহলে আমাদের FSTPর সংখ্যা বাড়াতে হবে। আমাদের নিজস্ব FSTP নির্মাণের জায়গা আছে, আমরা নতুন করে আরো FSTP নির্মাণ করার পরিকল্পনা হাতে নিয়েই আমরা এই টাকাগুলো একটি হিসাবে সংরক্ষণ করছি। আমাদের অনারেবল মেয়র, ডাইনামিক মেয়র, উনি অত্যন্ত এই সমস্ত ব্যাপারে, এই আইনের ব্যাপারে উনি শ্রদ্ধাশীল এবং জনগণের সাথে উনি মোটিভেটেড করে এই ট্যাক্স আদায়ের ব্যাপারে উনি সর্বদা সচেষ্ট আছেন এবং নিয়মিত এই বিষয়গুলো উনি কাজ করছেন, যার কারণে উনি FSM লিডার নামে খ্যাতি অর্জন করেছেন। উনি বাংলাদেশের মধ্যে একটি মডেল মেয়র হিসাবে স্বীকৃতি পেয়েছেন, FSM লিডার হিসেবে স্বীকৃতি পেয়েছেন এবং FSM কার্যক্রমে ওনার কার্যক্রম সারা বাংলাদেশে পৌরসভাগুলো ওনার কার্যক্রমকে অনুকরণীয় হিসাবে গ্রহণ করেছেন। তাছাড়া আপনারা নিশ্চয়ই জেনেছেন যে ঝিনাইদহ পৌরসভা বাংলাদেশ কেন এশিয়া মহাদেশের মধ্যে আন্তর্জাতিক মান সনদ অর্জন করেছে, যেটা FSM এর উপর ভিত্তি করেই, এই কার্যক্রমের উপর ভিত্তি করেই আমাদের আন্তর্জাতিক মান সনদ ISO 2009 আমরা অর্জন করতে সক্ষম হয়েছি। এটা আমাদের মেয়র মহোদয়ের নিতান্ত প্রচেষ্টার কারণেই এই কার্যক্রমগুলো বাস্তবায়ন আমাদের সম্ভব হয়েছে। আমরা FSM ট্যাক্স নিয়মিত আদায় করছি। এর বাইরেও আমরা স্যানিটেশন সেবা দেওয়ার সময় আমরা আমাদের যে ভ্যাকুট্যাক আছে, এটা আমরা এই FSM কার্যক্রমকে আমরা বেসরকারি পর্যায়ে হস্তান্তর করেছি। একটা বেসরকারি অর্গানাইজেশন আমাদের সাথে তারা কন্ট্রাক্টের মাধ্যমে তারা PPR 2010 অনুযায়ী আমাদের এই কন্ট্রাক্টটা তাদের হয়েছে। PPR আমাদের বাংলাদেশে সারা পৃথিবীতে এখন পাবলিক প্রকিউরমেন্ট রুল অনুযায়ী কার্যক্রম চলে। আমরা পাবলিক প্রকিউরমেন্ট রুল অনুযায়ী আমরা আমাদের এই সেবাটাকে টেন্ডারের মাধ্যমে হস্তান্তর করেছি এবং একটি বেসরকারি অর্গানাইজেশন এই সেবাটা আমাদের সাথে চুক্তিতে আবদ্ধ হয়ে তারা এই সেবাটা দিচ্ছে। আমরা তাদের সাথে আমাদের শেয়ারিং এর ভিত্তিতে আমরা এই ট্যারিফ আমরা আদায় করি। এই ট্যারিফের অর্থ আমাদের আলাদা হিসাবে সংরক্ষিত হয়। এখানে আমরা রেজিস্ট্রেশন ফি গ্রহণ করি, যেটা আমাদের বেসরকারি সংস্থা যার সাথে আমাদের এই সেবাটি কন্ট্রাক্ট হয়েছে, তারা রেজিস্ট্রেশন ফি আমাদের লিটারের ভ্যাকুটাকে আমরা 1500 টাকা প্লাস ভ্যাট 15% ভ্যাট আমরা নিয়ে আমরা ভ্যাট সরকারি খাতে জমা দিই এবং এই 1500 টাকা আমরা উভয় পার্টির মধ্যে শেয়ারিং করি। পরবর্তী যে পার টিপ এই টিপে আমরা একটি ট্যারিফ নির্ধারণ করেছি, সেই ট্যারিফের টাকা যে সংস্থা এই সার্ভিসটি দেয় তারা এটা নেই, আমরা তারা এটা নিয়ে তাদের কর্মীদের স্যালারি প্লাস গাড়ির ফুয়েল মেনটেনেন্স আদার কার্যক্রম তারা বাস্তবায়ন করে এবং সেখান থেকেও তারা অনেক লাভবান হয়েছে। তাদের সাথে আমাদের মান্থলি মিটিং হয়, ত্রৈমাসিক ভিত্তিতে মিটিং হয়, 6 মাসের ভিত্তিতে মিটিং হয়, বছর ভিত্তিতে ক্লোজিং মিটিং হয়। এর ভিত্তিতে আমরা ট্যারিফ কি পরিমাণ আমাদের ওরা কালেকশন মানে আমাদের বেসরকারি সংস্থা কি পরিমাণ কালেক্ট করেছে এবং আমরা কতটুকু আমাদের পাওয়ার কথা কতটুকু আমরা সেই পরিমাণ পেয়েছি কিনা এবং আমাদের গ্রাহকরা এই ব্যাপারে সন্তুষ্টি আছে কিনা, গ্রাহক সার্ভিস পেয়ে খুশি কিনা, আমরা এই সমস্ত বিষয় নিয়ে আমরা মান্থলি মিটিং এ আলোচনা করি, ত্রৈমাসিক মিটিং এ আলোচনা করি। আমরা বাৎসরিক ভিত্তিতে সমস্ত বিষয়ে আমরা আমাদের ত্রুটি বিচ্যুতিগুলো তুলে ধরি এবং সেগুলো সমাধানের মাধ্যমে গ্রাহক এক কথায় গ্রাহকের আমাদের কাস্টমারের সন্তুষ্টি স্যাটিসফাইড সাপেক্ষেই আমরা এই ট্যাক্স আদায় করি এবং এই ট্যারিফ আদায় করি। আমরা এই কার্যক্রম বাস্তবায়নে আমাদের মেয়র মহোদয়, আমাদের পৌর পরিষদ, আমাদের পৌরসভার কর্মকর্তা কর্মচারীবৃন্দ, ওভারঅল সমস্ত প্রকার জনগণ আমাদেরকে সহযোগিতা করেন। আমরা এই কার্যক্রম বাস্তবায়নে আমরা ওয়ার্ড পর্যায়ে আমরা এই কার্যক্রম বাস্তবায়নে এসএনবি এর সহযোগিতায় আমরা এই ওয়ার্ড পর্যায়ে বিভিন্ন সেমিনারের আয়োজন করেছি, মাদের নিয়ে আয়োজন করেছি, আমরা ওয়ার্ড পর্যায়ে এলিট পার্সন এবং বিভিন্ন শ্রেণী পেশার মানুষ নিয়ে আলোচনা করেছি। আমাদের এখানে আঞ্চলিক ভিত্তিতে পটগান, জারি গান, বিভিন্ন আনুষ্ঠানিকতার মাধ্যমে আমরা জনগণকে উদ্বুদ্ধ করতে পেরে জনগণ আমাদের এই ভ্যাকুডাক সেবা অত্যন্ত সাদরে গ্রহণ করেছে এবং তারা অত্যন্ত কি বলবো এটা খুব খুশি মনে তারা আমাদেরকে এই সেবা গ্রহণ করে তারা আমাদের যে স্যানিটেশন ট্যাক্স এবং ট্যারিফ এটা দিয়ে যাচ্ছে। এটা আমাদের আমরা
থ্যাংক ইউ মুস্তাক ভাই, আপনি খুবই সুন্দরভাবে মানে সবকিছু গুছিয়ে একদম মানে আমাদেরকে এটা যে শেয়ার করতে পারলেন, থ্যাংক ইউ ভেরি মাচ ফর দ্যাট। অ্যান্ড অলসো জাস্ট টু গো I mean like and we have seen that in most of these towns, I mean like Mustak bhai mentioned about how the Gates Foundation and SNB is providing support to the town. Similarly, even in the case of Dhenkanal, the town is getting support from other technical organizations, as we have also seen in the case of Birtamod. But now, unlike most of the smaller towns that we have studied, I think in the case of Sirsila, the town was able to generate the capital investment through public financing support from the state government. And the town entirely has its sanitation infrastructure with funding from the public and the state government. And with respect to the intergovernmental transfers, one of the common problems that also Maya mentioned and which has been cited across the other 3 countries was the unpredictability of such transfers. Without clarity of on the timing, rules and amounts of fund, the municipalities cannot develop medium to long-term plans or long-term budget or investment plans. Whereas the case of Sirsila is a bit of an outlier over there. And I would request Bitush to please share or help us understand how the funds are allocated from the state to the municipality and how reliable and predictable are these transfers in the case of Sirsila. Bitush?
Yeah, thanks, Ram. So I'm speaking on behalf of Raghu Soma, who's the environmental engineer there. As Ram mentioned earlier in the webinar that there's heavy rainfall in Sirsila today, and that's the reason he's not here. So I'll try my best to explain what's happening in Sirsila. Just a brief about Sirsila. It's a small town, like it was defined, it's less than 1 lakh population in the state of Telangana. So this town is completely dependent on on-site sanitation systems. And with respect to the funding, as any other town, it's more reliant on transfers, intergovernment transfers for the capital infrastructure development. So with respect to just a brief about how they are managing their on-site systems, there are 6 private players, operators who are flying in the city. They have been licensed by the municipality, and they have also designed, developed, and implemented a fecal sludge treatment plant. It's an 18 KLD plant, nature-based plant. So I'll come to it a little later as well. And with respect to solid waste, they have been able to manage to do 5-point segregation at the source itself, which means a lot less work towards the end of the cycle. Because they are able to, so they did a lot of IEC campaigns and to make sure that the segregation happens at the source itself. So that's how they're managing their solid waste. Now, if I need to summarize with respect to, we'll come to the funding part. We'll come back to it again and again. So if I need to summarize how they are able to give sustainable sanitation to their citizens, so we can summarize into 6 points. There are 3 C's and 3 D's to it. To start with, very first C would be a city sanitation plan. So the town developed, it was not developed by an external agency. The officials of the town got trained to develop a city sanitation plan, and it was developed with a participatory approach, which they, of course, go back to again and again to understand what projects they should be implementing. A city sanitation plan also helps them to make their annual plans. One of the things that you may say that a small town is more like reacting to situation, but this town, because it also has a CSP, is able to plan not only annually but also biannually for 2 years, 3 years, picking it up from the CSP. So that's the very first C. The second C is they have a good core team, which they strengthen very frequently through capacity building programs. So when I say strong core team, they have civil engineers, they have environmental engineers, they have a town planner, they have an accounts officer, of course, commissioner, and all of them. And this core team is actually like taking the ship forward, and they keep on. They don't leave any opportunity to strengthen this core team. So they attend a lot of capacity building programs. And the third C would be they have a good complaint redressal system in place, which is in the municipality also they have, people can come and of course complain whatever they have a complaint about. But this core team, which I mentioned in the previous point, does regular ward visits. So for example, if you are staying in Silsila, you know that on this day, the core team, which is responsible for sanitation, is going to come and visit in the morning. So they are able to interact with people, understand their problems better. So when I said they made their annual plans, so CSP plus this mechanism of complaints really feed into better planning for sanitation. Now coming to 3 Ds, they believe a lot in digitization. So whether it's double accounting system at the finance level or putting GPS into the community toilets they have installed, or having installed GPS on the private MTS that are applying in the city, or the solid waste collection vehicles. So they are able to track all their vehicles well, which makes sure not only good sanitation service to the households, also means that there is no illegal dumping of whether solid waste or fecal sludge anywhere illegally done. So they are able to monitor their services much better. And so they keep on digitizing their services. So that's our first D. Then they have also done a lot of decentralized they've gone with a decentralized approach. Like, for example, the fecal sludge treatment plant is not operated by municipal officials or anybody hired by municipality. They have gone into a private, public-private partnership. So it's like now you have to run the system. If you perform, you will get paid for it. And they're also supposed to monitor each and every truck that comes and kind of delivers the fecal sludge. They have, for running their resource recovery unit at the solid waste site, the women self-help group have been trained to operate. So again, municipality is not operating the solid waste management side as well. So the self-help group does it for them. So they have the slum development group kind of trains people to run the public toilets all across the city. Again, municipality is not hiring anybody to run their public toilets. So they believe in a lot of decentralized approach with respect to managing services that they're providing. Now, the final D, which is, I think, the most relevant, is they use a diversified source of revenue. They're not just dependent on the state and the central transfers. They have their own source of revenue, which is tax revenue as well as non-tax revenue. I believe I don't have too much of time to get deeper into it, but since the question that Ram asked refers to how or why you think that's reliable. So the 14th Finance Commission money or the 15th Finance Commission money now, which comes from the center and the state to the city. So instead of giving them, giving a town the money on an annual basis, what Telangana has done is that they will, so there is a share from the center, an equivalent share from the state comes to the town on a monthly basis. So imagine a town which is having its own source revenue to do operation and maintenance well. Plus they know there is a reliable source, regular source of revenue, which comes every month to them for planning and implementing their capital investments. And every month, like first week, they will get that chunk of money, which they can use for implementing projects that they have planned using a CSP, as I said in the beginning. So, so that makes a lot of difference because this town is not just reacting, or the municipality is not reacting to the problems that are generated based on sanitation on day-to-day basis. They are also going on a planned approach while implementing projects. As well as one point I want to add that it's just not, so the CSP also tells them that they have to go in an incremental approach. They can't just turn the city in one day. So for example, they did a FSTP first, and now they are, their core team is discussing how they can improve or work around doing grey water management or the supernatant that flows in the open drains. So slowly and steadily, they are moving towards providing much better sanitation based on the reliable source of funding that they have. So I'll stop.
Thank you, Bitush. I think, and one thing which is, thanks for responding to the and sharing the details about the how the funding is structured in the case of Telangana from within the state to the ULBs. But I think one point which is very clearly which came out across when Rasmita ji was speaking, and also in Dhrubaji's mentioned when he was mentioning, as well as in terms of what Mustaq Bhai mentioned with SNB supporting, providing support to them. I think one critical thing which is a big takeaway, at least for me, is that these smaller small towns, they do lack the technical capacity and the financial capacity, but in order to, and they would require the technical assistance, and in order to deliver those technical assistance, I think it is very critical to structure it in such a way that local communities are engaged and we build their capacities from the beginning of the intervention, so that there is a clear ownership from the municipalities, and such that they can take like we handhold them and they can take it in future by operating and maintaining it by themselves. and also building their capacities and providing them with the capacities to plan for them, to develop a CSP or to develop an investment plan, and then have the funding based on those need assessment. I think that is one of the critical things that smaller towns can small critical thing that these towns can implement. And with this thought, I would just thank all the participants, all the panelists over here, and hand it over to Meenu over here. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks to Maya and Ram and the discussants for shedding light on such an important research. Now we move on into the closing plenary by sector experts and policymakers. Before we start, let's find out a bit more about our panelists for today. Ms. Bhavana Sharma, the Executive Director of Environment and Public Health Organization, ENFO, Nepal. ENFO is a flag bearer organization of sanitation for the last 29 years and has been supporting the government to back up its commitment towards meeting the Sustainable Development Goals. Ms. Bhavana is a public health and development expert with more than 19 years of experience. She is also serving as the national convener of Freshwater Action Network South Asia, FANSA, in Nepal. FANSA is the civil society network working on WASH issues having presence in all the 8 countries of South Asia. Next, we have Ms. Neeta Pokhrel, who is the Chief of Water Sector Group at the Asian Development Bank. Ms. Neeta has over 25 years of experience working with ADB, private sector, international consulting firms, non-governmental organizations, and water utilities. Ms. Neeta leads strategic development of ADB's water sector and provides knowledge management and implementation support to the operational departments to meet ADB's goal of resilient and water-secure Asia and the Pacific. Next, we have Mr. Muyatwa Sitali, who currently leads the current country engagement team of the UNICEF-hosted Sanitation and Water for All Secretariat. The team provides policy advocacy and programmatic support to more than 300 partners, including about 75 governments in Africa, Asia, and the Pacific, and the Latin America and Caribbean regions. Previously, Mr. Sitali consulted at the World Bank and held various positions in social justice at Oxfam in West Africa. Before that, he worked in Zambia on how economic governance impacts social services delivery. Mr. Sitali has a Master of International Development Policy from Duke University and a graduate certificate in Peace and Conflict Resolution from the University of North Carolina. Next, we have Mr. Mohammad Imdadul Haq Chaudhry, and he is the Joint Secretary of Local Government Division under the Ministry of Local Government, Rural Development and Cooperatives. He is currently in charge of Policy Support Branch of Local Government Division. Policy Support Branch is mainly responsible for developing and updating different policy strategy guidelines for issues related to water, sanitation, and hygiene. As a career civil servant, Mr. Chaudhry has been working with the government for the last 22 years. He has spent most of his career in the field administration and worked with local government institutions. In Local Government Division, he worked in the urban wing and used to look into the administrative and development issues of city corporations. He also worked as the Deputy Commissioner, Head of District Level Administration in Naral District. Mr. Chaudhry obtained a MSc degree in Biochemistry from Dhaka University in Bangladesh and an MA degree in Governance and Development from BRAC University. Lastly, during closing, we will have Dr. Peter Harvey, who is UNICEF's Regional WASH Advisor for South Asia. He has 25 years of experience in WASH programming with UNICEF, international NGOs, and academia, and has an extensive publications record related to water and sanitation. In recent years, he has developed particular interest in market-based approaches to WASH, innovative financing, climate resilience, and sustainability. I would request the panelists and speaker to please come in and turn on their videos now. This session will be moderated by Ms. Vanita Suneja, Regional Advocacy Manager for WaterAid South Asia. That will be all from me. Thank you so much. Over to you, Vanita.
Yeah. Thanks, Meenu, and welcome to the closing plenary. I would request all the panelists and speakers for this session to please keep your camera on. And to the participants, hopefully we should have some time for questions. So please do put your questions in the question answers box. And given that we have half an hour to go, I would request my esteemed panelists to please keep your interventions up to 5 minutes. And I will start with Bhavna ji. Welcome, Bhavna ji. It's great to have you here, representing ENFO as well as FANSA. As we know that in the new federal structure adopted by Nepal and with decentralization, roles and responsibilities now have shifted a lot to the municipalities. And there is a lot of expectations from municipalities to perform that role. And we know that in order to perform that role, they need to have adequate financing. So my question to you is that, what would be your 2 or 3 key recommendations to strengthen the municipality financing in Nepal? And given that you also, put FANSA ahead, so what do you think could be the role of civil society to strengthen that role of municipalities, especially that they should not leave anyone behind? Thank you. And over to you, Bhavna ji, for this.
Thank you, Vanita. And namaste and good afternoon to all. And like Constituency of Nepal 2005-15 has fundamentally changed the political landscaping of Nepal, and the state power has been shifted from further down to municipality, provincial level to the local level, that is municipality. And the policies and this state and local government has right to make plan policies and implement within their jurisdiction within the constitution provision. And similarly, the funds, we are talking about the financing. The funds also transfer from central to provincial and local level through the financial equalization fund and the conditional fund, but it is from the central government. And from municipalities to generate their own fund. So these are very few, quickly I can say a few things that first we have to do the mapping of resources and taxation base, including land, housing, registry, natural resources, data, etc. Second is I can say building and then building the institutional capacity. And it is lacking. It was noticed it was spoken already by the previous speaker, that institutional capacity for tax administration, for mobilization of internal revenue. And third is to create the framework for spending efficiency and effective allocation of resources across the sector. And another is a main important, it's a robust internal control mechanism that appear to be very important, and including reporting framework for fiscal oversight and accountability. And fifth one is we are always from the development partner and the outsider, not in the government, working from the government, most of us, establish partnership with the development partners and private sector to attract the viable financial possibilities. So that we can also, if we can explore something, then we can also track this conditional fund from the central government as well. So another question that you spoke about, how we can work effectively in the CSO can play a role, and then with the LNOB, not leaving behind all the people who should be included. So it was a different study was conducted before, Save the Children's. It conducted study, and it was fine. They found that CSO has to play the major role in situation where the government's lack capacity, capability, and or the will be provided essential service to the citizen. So we know that in our municipality, it is new and it is not that mature, and they need to capacitate. And first we can start from, as you said about the LNOB, I'd like to start from the legislation. I already told that this municipality and local government and provincial government can make rule, policy, and legislation. So CSO working in the community level can play the supportive role, enabling marginalized group influence and local legislation making process to address the collective issues. Donors and development agencies should support and local government and the local community organization in promoting an institutionalization of inclusive and locally responsive legislation making process to ensure that elected women official, elected delegate, and from different marginalized group that we are talking about the LNOB, and can meaningfully undertake the legislative role and function. Second, I will go from the implementation and development process, putting LNOB at the center stage. So all the CSO, the civil society organization, have a vital role to play, supporting government and implementing SDG activities. And CSO can design and implement the innovative program in line with government's priorities that we are talking about SDG. Whatever government has a priority, CSO can design SDG which is more flexible and can be replicated by government. And this program can be LNOB should be in the center of the stage, so that because there are some restriction in government and it is not designed, then some pilot project can be developed and implemented with the help of government, so that municipal government, so that it could be replicated in the future, and need to work in both. So that is again the vital role of civil society is to generate awareness that we have to work in the both side, like the demand side and supply side. And whereas when we are talking about the demand side, most of the time the LNOB group are always left out. So we have to consider to addressing the needs and to generate awareness, like what type of language we should use and how we can do our communication messages, awareness, and done. And then another is like to the supply side, holding them responsible to reach all the section of the society, so that we civil society can connect to LNOB group. And again, in Nepal, the federal system of government provides the opportunity for local CSO to engage with the government in designing, implementing, and monitoring in different programs. So CSO need to build that capacity also. Not only the government, even the CSO, they should build that capacity, how, and to reach the potential, they should have that potential that government should provide the conducive political and legal environment for them to thrive. So these are the things that about the journal. And for example, even Info is doing similar type of work and working for last 29 years and closely with the local government. And one of the projects, if I get time, so I don't know how much, so one of the project is ISO certified sanitation solution in Mahalakshmi that Maya was talking about. So that is one example that it is started like a pilot the first time in the world, and it considered all LNOB issues. So because it is city-wide inclusive sanitation plan, so it includes all sections of the society. That is one example I have to give you. Another is like advocacy programs that I was talking about, the awareness, advocacy, and working in both demand side and supply side. Another project is that advocacy project. We have like successfully can do the advocacy in 5 municipalities, so that the municipality came up with the sanitation budget and they came forward to have more support. So that if you can do the program like in the demand side and supply side and considering the need, what is more needed, that will work, I think. I stop here. I think like
Thank you, Bhavna ji. Very, very insightful. And I think it's, I mean, as I hear from you, I think it's a long way in terms of the reforms which are actually required, after the decentralization, but actually to make it practically, happening on the ground. There's a long way to go for the municipalities to, with all that institutional changes and the mapping and all which you talked about. And also the whole issue of the civil society's role, which is a very critical and crucial role which civil society generally plays. So many thanks for that. And it's very nice to hear you from Nepal. And I would now like to invite Neeta ji. Namaste, Neeta ji, and it's my pleasure to have you here. And many thanks for taking time from your busy schedule. And we know that ADB is a very, very key player in this region. And there are lots of investment which are going in South Asia, especially on WASH or on the urban infrastructure. or they could be also on the governance part of it. So my question to you, Neetaji, is that in the light of the investment made by ADB in the South Asia region, what do you think are the main challenges for the municipalities to be able to sustain and operate and manage the assets created for the water services? One thing is about the intervention done or investment done, the other is the whole sustainability or the impact, long-term impact. So if you would like to share some of those challenges in this region. And I would also want you to throw light on some of the specific interventions which ADB has taken to strengthen the municipalities through your investment, especially in smaller towns. So over to you, Neetaji.
Thank you, Vanitaji. It's a pleasure to be here. I must admit, it's very timely initiative, the dialogue series, and I found the scene setting, the presentations, and the discussions very enriching indeed. You don't have too much time. I think we have a lot of speakers here, so I'll be very brief. From our experience, as you said, specifically in South Asia, I want to put these key challenges in 3 baskets. First is access to timely and predictable funds. I think many of the other speakers also talked about the predictability of it, whether it is in the form of transfers from the government, whether they're the taxes they can raise or they are allocated a portion of, or tariffs that they charge themselves to manage the services. And again, I think Maya in her presentation a while ago also talked about this. It's the guarantee of it or the predictability. If it cannot be guaranteed, but if it's predictable, then municipality can find other ways to find it. The other issue, I think as much as we like municipalities, small ones in South Asia to be able to raise their own funds, have the credit worthiness, we have a while to go. But when it comes to availability of external funds, be it through financial intermediaries or some other means, minimal transaction hassles or the ease of availing that financing we find is very important. And not only that ease of accessing these funds or minimal transaction hassles, but also ensuring that hand-holding is there and monitoring support. I think some other speakers also talked about it, to ensure that they are judiciously used and optimally used, we find is another challenge. Now, the second basket, I would put governance, and solely and with a big G. The autonomy of the municipality, and by that I mean real autonomy, not just on paper. We're all trying to say they're decentralized, but how much autonomy do they really have? Because that governs, along with the tools that they can have, the ability to raise funds, the ability to have the right system, and the ability to build the necessary capacity. That is why I put this basket at the big basket, and I call it the big G. The challenge. And this now brings me to my third basket, which is the institutional capacity. And I think we heard from many speakers, we heard from the municipalities themselves. It really is about the people and the skills. The systems they can have in place with the people and the skills and the knowledge they will generate and the data they will collect. And if I can throw in here, because I've also worked in all these countries that were represented, Bangladesh, India, Nepal, quite extensively, I personally find, and as an institution, we find the right leadership is extremely important when it comes to municipalities. The leadership, when you combine that with autonomy, we have found in municipalities have achieved wonders in managing and expanding the services. And all these challenges, the basket of challenges are interlinked. As many speakers have said, you have good governance framework, you will have easier access and continuity of funds. But funds alone are really not enough. We are financiers and we always repeat this. You really need the capacity to be able to utilize it for sustainable outcomes. Vanitaji, you talked about sustaining them. So having funds to just build assets is one part, but the municipalities need to be equipped to prioritize their needs with the participation of the stakeholders, to plan holistically. And somebody mentioned the C's and how important it is to have the right plans to begin with. And knowing your assets, mapping your assets, the tools for it, optimizing them to begin with, and implementing the capital investments are important. And the spiral, what we call build, neglect, rehabilitate assets that we see not only in small municipalities, large municipalities are the same, is not from lack of funds. And you know, as financiers, we repeat that it is often, most often from lack of capacity and governance. So your second part of question, I'll be very brief and in the interest of time. All of these challenges that I mentioned, the baskets of challenges in all our investments that flows to municipalities, we work with them to see which of these challenges are prevalent, to what degree, and how do we find entry points to tackle and sustain them. And that is really how we work in most of our projects. I'll give 3 specific projects that we have worked in South Asia. One is the Small Towns Project. It is a series of projects. We've been funding them for the last 20 years, very successful model. And the Birtamur example that was given earlier is from it. It is based on cost sharing, you know, where you build the ownership, cost sharing to the extent they can afford. And that is very important. Mapping out what is affordable and what is sustainable, and allowing the communities to jointly plan, to jointly manage, to jointly monitor and pay back has been a success of this model. That is now, second is we are supporting multiple municipalities there through a financial intermediary, TNU IFSL. Used to be called Tamil Nadu TNUDF in past. And another one is the Bangladesh project, the UGIP, the Urban Governance Improvement Project. In the India one, again, you have a financial intermediary and not only allowing the funds to be accessed by municipalities, it is the long-term hand-holding support that TNUFSL has been able to provide. It is the support on setting the governance structures. It's the support on creating the platform for citizens to participate. And that was also a key in Nepal. In digitalization, in financial management tools, in mapping of assets, in having the GIS tools and the ability to sustain when the GIS tools have been put in place are again other key interventions. But if you ask me, summarize it all, what has it been? Is the sustained support, the long haul, repeated support that that banks like ourselves and partners, any development partners, you can't just go in and say, yep, we'll support you on this project. You need to go back repeatedly and make sure that the institutional capacity is there and the governance is there to sustain these services. And I will stop here and I'm happy to take questions later. Thank you, Vanita ji.
Thank you, Neeta ji. I think you have nailed it very rightly, that it's not only about the financing, but overall governance, the institutional capacity, and many more things, which comes as a package for sustaining the assets. So many thanks for it. And now I would request our other stakeholder, a very important multilateral stakeholder in the sense like from the civil society. So I would like to call Sitali from SWA. Sitali, it's great to have you here. And as we know that the overall finance ministers meeting is a very important kind of event or an output through which various stakeholders come together with SWA. So my question to you would be that we know that adequate financing for WASH is very important, but what would be your key recommendations for the finance minister specifically for creating enabling environment and strengthening of municipal financing for small towns as such? So I just want to check with you, do you think that in your meetings with the finance minister, do we get into these nuances of requirement at the small towns and the how the municipalities could be strengthened? So over to you, Sitali. Hope I'm clear.
Thank you so much, Vanita. That was very clear. And I'd like to start by thanking you and the colleagues that you work with in the WaterAid South Asia office for conceptualizing this series of dialogues. As Nita and others have already said, it is timely. And I think the set of topics that you've identified, they speak to the challenges that we're facing at this time. So I just wanted to say thank you to you and also to the other co-conveners as well as the other panelists that we're discussing with today. And as you've put it forward, Sanitation and Water for All engages at a political level with ministers that are responsible for water and sanitation, but we also engage with ministers that are responsible for finance and economic development, depending on the topic that we're discussing. Given the topic that we have today, I wanted to flag one main issue, which is basically that we prepared last year a finance handbook. A handbook for finance ministers. And that handbook has got really good examples of how to manage service delivery when it comes to utilities and how when it comes to municipalities, and how can you support municipalities for them to be able to play their function well. They are reaching out to small towns. Some of these places are very sparsely populated, so the cost per capita is very high. Even the political implications might be limited if you have very few populations. So we realize that the small towns, these communities that are actually far-flung, are also places that are very much at risk when it comes to leave no one behind. Sanitation and Water for All brings together finance ministers, as you stated, but our partners go much beyond that in terms of reaching to municipalities and reaching to the small towns. So raising this issue in terms of what is the information that is needed for finance ministers to make the right decisions, whether they're talking about a block transfer or they're working out a national taxation regime that should create a space for municipalities to be able to gather the relevant taxes at the municipal level, or for the tariffs to actually be sound across the board. These examples that we have for finance ministers are very important in that regard. Some of the examples also look at how you can incentivize municipalities to be able to actually deliver more services and even invest some of their money into these services. Some of the examples look at the municipality development funds and how they can continue to be replenished so that you can continue to have some kind of a revolving fund. So I just wanted to flag really this handbook, which was meant for finance ministers, that was prepared last year. It's got very good examples on municipality, on working with municipalities. If you're engaging with your finance ministers, please do use that. I had an example that I wanted to share from Brazil, but I think I will not do that now. I think what I will share, just the three things following the style that Nita shared. And these are 3 Ps. Of course, yes, they link to the public-private partnerships as well. But I wanted to catch on the first P, which is the politics. The finance ministers operate at the political level, and the municipalities also, with the mayors and others, they also engage at the political level. I think it is important really to ensure that the politics are geared towards service delivery, that they're geared towards addressing those who are left behind, the small towns, and what types of services they need. The second P is about partnership. And this could be partnership for financing. It could be partnership for extending services. It could be about partnership for bringing communities together so that they could be able to manage these types of utilities, as the example I wanted to share from Brazil shows. So this P is really important in terms of ensuring that there are sufficient partnerships to bring the services to the right level. Now, the last P is the type of program. So you've got the politics, you've got the partnerships, and I think the type of program and how it brings everyone together, how it addresses the gaps in the sector in terms of the plans, the policies, are they there, are they missing? And how do you address those gaps in the sector using the partnerships that you have? I think that those are very critical. And in our engagement with ministers, we do address this issue of building blocks to ensure that they cover the right gaps in the sector. In the interest of time, I will pause at this point, Vanita, and thank you so much.
Thanks, Italy, and good for pointing this P. and the program. So I would go to the another P. In the sense, I will call Mr. Imdad to share with us about the policy and program initiatives which has been taken by Bangladesh government over the years to strengthen the municipalities. So, and thank you, Mr. Imdad, for your time, and over to you.
So thank you very much. Good afternoon. Thank you very much for having me as a panelist in your discussion. Am I audible?
Yes, yes.
Okay, thank you. Yes, thank you for your question. And at the beginning, I like to thank all the speakers and presenters for sharing their ideas, sharing their practices for improving water sector achievements. Actually, Bangladesh, though geographically is not a very big country, but in terms of population, Bangladesh is a very big country, and the density of population in the urban areas is very high. So it is always very challenging to provide services to the people, as number of people are very high in very small areas. Regarding policies, actually, it is I'm very much happy to inform you that recent times Bangladesh government has formulated some very important policies regarding sanitation. Especially, we have formulated a strategy that is institutional and regulatory framework for fecal sludge management. This is for the municipalities, that is for the small towns. And also we have formulated a national action plan to implement the regulatory framework of fecal sludge management in the small town. This is already done. So at the policy level, we have some specific guidelines for the municipalities to take initiatives to improve the sanitation services. And also we have a policy framework that is pro strategy for water supply and sanitation sector, so that we our poor people are included in the service, and no one is left behind. So to ensure that, we have formulated pro strategy, and at the same time we are updating our strategies to align with SDG. For example, recently we have updated national strategy for water supply and sanitation, and it is aligned with SDG. Besides, we have national strategies, we have 8 5-year plan, we have a perspective plan, long-term plan, and we have a delta plan. In all the plan, I think water sector is highlighted. So regarding policy issues, we have important policies in place so that we can go ahead. Regarding financial aspects, sustainable financing in the small towns for sanitation, which is very important, and this is the main issue of today's evening. I think all the practitioners and the speakers have mentioned very important issues regarding sustainability of financing. This is the very important issue, I think, and also this is important in the context of Bangladesh. And regarding financial support, I think government, central government, that is the Ministry of Local Government, Rural Development and Cooperatives, we used to give some transfers in terms of transfer as a part of annual development plan. The transfer goes to the municipalities directly, and these are in form of block grants. So the elected representative at the municipality level, they can design, they can plan of their own as per the priority and demand of the locality. So the block grants, this is one of the main source of fund, and other is the project assistance. And I think the project assistance is very important in the context of Bangladesh, especially in the water sector. And we have a central central department, that is the Department of Public Health Engineering. And this department used to implement capital investment in the municipalities so that they can work and maintain this strategy, maintain this capital structures. For example, we used to develop the fecal sludge management plants at the municipality level, and we used to build community latrines, public toilets, and also some facilities for solid waste management, especially construction of landfills. These are being done by the central government, and then this infrastructure and construction are handed over to the municipality for maintenance and operation. So this is an important issue, important source of funding, project assistance for the municipalities. And more importantly, for sustaining the funding or sustainable funding, it is important to have the own source revenue for the municipalities. And our government is giving emphasis on the own source revenue generation. This is very important because if our municipalities and small towns are financially stable, and they can have their own plan for sustainable sanitation. So own source revenue generation is very important, and already mentioned by the Secretary of the Jhinaido Purusabha, the tax financing and also sanitation tax is introduced, and some Purusabha already they are imposing sanitation taxes to the citizens. So this is a very important source of fund, and we are encouraging our municipalities for generating own source revenue so that they can sustain. And besides that, actually private sector involvement is very important, and PPP, private public partnership that is being encouraged by our policies, and also in some cases we are actually having some practical experiences, but we are to amend our policies regarding PPA because at present PPA deals with big projects. So we need to amend our PPA policy for small projects so that we can implement small projects in municipalities, especially wash projects through PPP model. So this is very important. I think important source can be a very important source of funding for the municipalities, especially for the wash sector intervention. And then actually one thing we are practicing in a small scale, but we should scale it up. That is the cost recovery mechanism, beneficiary pay principle, because Bangladesh, Bangladesh is developing and our per capita income is increasing. So we have to have this sort of mechanism. Unless we go for cost recovery and beneficiary pay principle, we cannot sustain our services. So this is very important, and we are also looking forward to scale up this sort of initiative. So these are the sources of funding, and if we want to sustain our initiatives for water sector in a comprehensive way, actually we have to go for a comprehensive deal. For example, I want to say we have to create demand for sanitation services, water services from the citizen. Citizen has to demand, services. For this, I think awareness building and hygiene education is very important, so that they themselves demand for better services. This is very important, and it will create some ownership in the perspective of the citizen. Then I think we have to design low-cost sanitation materials, sanitation product, so that it can be, the poor people can access this. So designing low-cost and area-based sanitation products is very important. And also we have to encourage the small entrepreneurs and latrine producers. We have to have a very established sanitation market chain, so that supply and demand can go together. And then I think definitely we have to have a very good fecal sludge management system in place, because this is the most challenging issue at present to ensure safely managed sanitation. So fecal sludge management system should be in place. It is a very important issue. And sustainable financing, already I have mentioned, Own source revenue generation is very important, and we are giving emphasis for own source revenue generation.
Thank you,
So,
Mr. Imdad. So I'm sorry, I'm just because I think it's very, very comprehensive and very interesting insights. And we know that Bangladesh has been a kind of it's an inspiring story for all of us, Bangladesh in this region. You know, it's a torch bearer in the water sector anyway. And I think the very comprehensively you have put all the points, including the whole, financing, self-financing, which is very important. So many thanks, but just in the interest of time, we have to close it now. And I would and thank you to you, Mr. Imdad, for this. And now I would like to, give this difficult task of wrapping it up and closing it to Mr. Peter Harvey from UNICEF. Peter, over to you.
Thanks very much, Melita, and thank you to everyone. I'll try and be quick as we've run out of time. A really lively discussion and great to see so many people talking about financing. When we look at sanitation, 30 years ago we were all talking about technology. Then it moved on to marketing. Certainly not too soon. Ensuring sustainable services. It was interesting to hear some of the challenges, especially the small town space compared to large cities. So the three themes that came out in terms of multiple revenue streams, clustering of services and public engagement for municipal governments, I think are very, very topical. Just as we talk about health services and we look at different sources of funding into health services, we need to do the same with sanitation services. And it's great that we are talking about services, not facilities anymore. So of course, user fees are not the only mechanism. Cost recovery from users is not the only funding stream that we should be looking at. So listening to the examples around sanitation taxes and the circular economy in terms of reusing waste, I think is really good to hear. Clustering of services, achieving economies of scale, absolutely critical. And public engagement, absolutely, both in terms of generating demand and in terms of solving problems. Really interesting to hear the country examples in terms of the importance of planning, again, diversification of revenue and capacity came up many times, and building capacity. So I hope that those of you who've not had time to look at the report will look through the report. It's very informative, and these topics come out very clearly. And on behalf of all, there's a lot of planning that's gone into this. I've done very little apart from making a few comments now, but many other people have done a lot of work behind the scenes. So I'd like to thank them and thank all the speakers and the panelists and all you participants for your active engagement. So in the WASH sector, we always used to talk about appropriate technology or sustainable technology. I think now we need to be talking about appropriate financing and sustainable financing. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Peter, and from us also, from all the organizers, thanks to all of you for your patience. And please watch out this space for further such series, dialogue series, and please do write to us in case you think that there are specific topics or themes which at the South Asia level we need to discuss and do exchange of learnings and all. Many thanks to all.
Thank you all.